Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly for pricing questions, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we discuss something exceptional. From the first 20 series production Tourbillon Souverain built by François-Paul Journe in 1999, this is the original Tourbillon Souverain Tourbillon Remontoir Series 1, a watch that combined a tourbillon regulator with a remontoir d'égalité constant force device. It was a world premiere in its day, and the first 20 examples were sold à la brigade in subscription form, the seed money for the new Montre Journe company. Now, the watch is platinum and 38 millimeters in diameter by 9.3 millimeters thick by 44.5 millimeters lug tip to lug tip with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Throwing the watch on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see it fits nicely and will slide easily underneath a dress cuff or a tight sleeve. I can consider this watch a unisex option. As you'll see, it easily fits on my wrist. From over the top, it's nowhere near the edges, and it's flat enough again that you can easily wear it every day, no matter how tight your cuffs. Taking a quick look at the strap, you can see the strap that's been fit to this example is a newer strap that is the specification used on the T30. So it's got that same reddish-brown light coloration and calf skin, relatively thickly bolstered with a monotone stitch, a folded edge, and then we have black calf skin on the underside, and we have pull-tab spring bars, so we can quickly and easily remove the strap from the case if we wish to without the use of a tool. Simple, no-nonsense platinum pin buckle right here, and then we roll to the case, which established the design language for FP Journe dress watches right up through the present day. Even in 2021, these case lines will look familiar. Blended lug profiles, lugs tightly downturned, all of high polish, a domed case back, domed bezel, and a little overlapping lip to the case back and bezel that define the mid-case form rolling around. That crown is quite familiar now, but it was all new in 1999. Double dimple with a sharp knurling and a narrow profile. Now rolling over to the dial side of the watch, you could see that it is very much a first-generation tourbillon remontoir, and I should say this, the watch is beautifully imperfect. It's obviously handmade even in ways that later FP Journe tourbillon remontoir were not. These were all handcrafted watches using basic hand tools, and François-Paul was involved in these early models to an extent that he never would be again on subsequent tourbillon remontoir timepieces. Elements that make this a pre-2004 tourbillon remontoir include the open remontoir window down at 6 o'clock, of course the vertical printing of the power reserve scale, but more importantly are the features that really define this as a tourbillon remontoir souscription. So it's a first series tourbillon remontoir, which means you've got a number of distinctive elements. You've got relatively small font size for the printing of the power reserve scale. You can see that the numbers are actually smaller than the minutes around the primary time-telling dial. Of course, it's the first series tourbillon remontoir because it's the 20-piece subscription series, souscription. They were the first. And then, of course, we have the rounded remontoir cock, which you can see that would have been present on the first two tourbillon remontoir. Later on, it would be flat. Another element is that there is a distinct shininess to the dials. It's very shiny, and it has a relatively thick varnish or lacquer over its surface, such that the print almost seems to be floating on top of the dial rather than sitting right on its surface. It's almost as though there's a holographic quality with this sort of disembodied floating text everywhere along the dial. And then, of course, and this is a big deal for Journe connoisseurs, we have the large screws on the dial. This idea of putting assembly screws on the dial side was revolutionary in 1999. Controversial then, pretty much universally copied now, however. So you have the large bolts. Now, we also have elements that would be common to many FP Journe tourbillon timepieces right up to the present day, including a tourbillon that beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, includes an overcoil hairspring, and is free-sprung for precise setting as well as durability. We have these lovely biomorphic tapered blue Journe-style hands. As you can see, then and now, we have a power reserve indicator that's inspired by the marine chronometer that actually moves backwards relative to expectations, because in the days of the marine chronometer, you would wind the navigation clock every every 24 hours at exactly the same time every day to get maximum regularity. So it was more important in the era of the marine chronometer to know how many hours since the last full winding rather than how many hours of runtime were left, because you always wanted to wind 24 hours since the last winding. So we have those elements. Getting close to some of the components, such as the tourbillon carriage or the half bridge for the tourbillon cage, or even the bezel that frames the tourbillon, you will see this is a very handmade watch. Beautifully imperfect is the way to describe it. Flipping it all over, you can see the very first version of the caliber 1498, 14 French lean in diameter, and then 1998 is the year Journe started work on it. So we have the chronomètre à tourbillon remontoir d'égalité, but we also have the notation that this is the first tourbillon souverain, so you can see the proper name of the model on the case back. You'll also note just how shallow the engraving is. Don't mistake this for over-polishing. This is how they were made in the early years of production of the tourbillon remontoir. Really, for the first 2 years that the watch was on the market, you would have seen this kind of shallow engraving. Now, what you'll also notice, if you look carefully, you'll see the maker's mark of Eleanor of France, as well as both Swiss and French hallmarks. It has both, because from his pocket watch days through about mid-2008, Journe bought his cases from Eleanor before he finally bought Eleanor and then shipped it to Geneva to create his case factory, Boîtier de Genève. That is why on these early examples, you're going to see the hallmarks of two different nations and a maker's mark that is not Montre Journe. Taking a quick look at the movement, you can see that it's all brass. That was the way back then. You would have brass bridges and plates, and then they'd be rhodium plated, and that was discontinued in mid-2004. We have the crown wheel, the ratchet wheel, a lovely swan's neck inspired click and click spring, so a nod to the pocket watch era. And then we have the remontoir d'égalité, the constant force device, which is based on a titanium linear spring. So the idea is every second the barrel will top off that spring, which will then transmit that 1 second worth of quantized energy to the escapement. So for roughly the first 28 hours of power reserve, enough to get you through a full day, the watch will maintain constant amplitude, which allows it to be regulated very precisely. The idea behind this watch was first to look beautiful, because Journe always says he designs his dials before he engineers his movements, but also to tell good time. And by adding the remontoir, he reclaimed much of the original chronometric intent of Abraham Louis Breguet's original tourbillon. So the tourbillon here is not solely responsible for the regularity of the watch. That's more a function of the constant force to the escapement. And as you can see, it is a handsomely detailed movement that includes a lovely gradient Côte de Genève. We have a rather crude engraving of all the characters, and there's engine turning underneath the click with black polishing on all screw heads and chamfering of their slots. This is very old school as Journe watches go, and whereas it was probably theoretically 30 meters water resistant back in the day, I beg you not to test the theory in the year 2021. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.